Federal government kicks as Saudi Arabia defends execution of Nigerian arrested for drug trafficking. INEC says 2019 polls have produced more than 700 election petitions at the appeal court. In international news, Brexit threatens mayhem for homeless Europeans who live in Britain. And in sport, Super Eagles moved to third in Africa in latest FIFA ranking.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The federal government has shown its displeasure over Saudi Arabia's execution of a Nigerian national, Kudirat Afolabi, for drug-related offences. Saudi authorities had beheaded Afolabi, a widow and mother of two. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mustafa Suleiman, described the execution inhuman during a meeting with the Saudi Arabian ambassador Adnan Bostaji in Abuja. Suleiman said while Nigeria respected the sovereignty of other countries and abhorred the violation of their domestic laws, it would not condone the inhumane treatment meted on its national. The federal government also frowned at the failure of Saudi authorities to inform the Nigerian mission in the kingdom about Afolabi's arrest and prosecution. The Court of Appeal says more than 700 election petitions have been filed challenging outcomes of the 2019 general elections at the federal and state levels. The Court of Appeal is the coordinating secretariat for all election petition affairs, including the selection of judges participating in election tribunals across the country. Data released by the Chief Registrar Election Petitions Tribunal, Raji Abdulaziz, show 4 petitions were filed to challenge the All Progressives Congress and President Muhammadu Buhari's victory at the February presidential poll. 207 elections petitions in the senatorial elections, the House of Representatives elections conducted in 360 federal constituencies had generated 101 petitions. The Zamfara State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal has relocated its proceedings to Abuja for security concerns. The 3-man panel tribunal, headed by Justice Binta Amina, granted an ex parte application the APGA candidate filed for permission to serve copies of his petition on the All Progressives Congress APC and its candidate, Mokhtar Idris, through substitute means. The tribunal gave the petitioner the nod to paste all the processes on the wall of the APC national headquarters in Abuja. The petitioners want the courts to nullify the governorship election that was conducted in Zamfara State last month and order a fresh election without the participation of APC and its candidates. Still on court matters, an Abuja Federal High Court has ordered the Senate President Bukola Saraki, Senators Dino Melaye and Ben Muribruz to immediately honor the invitation by the police over their roles in PDP's October protest march in Abuja. The protest was a fallout of last year's governorship election in Osun State, which was declared in favor of the All Progressives Congress. The 3 senators allegedly led a protest to the office of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Abuja, demanding a free and fair election this year. The 3 senators claimed that the police invitation amounted to harassment, intimidation, and an attempt by the police to detain them unlawfully. The Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation has so far recovered 29 billion naira from debtors of liquidated deposit money bank, microfinance banks, and primary mortgage banks. The NDIC boss says the corporation has commenced verification and payments to depositors in 154 microfinance banks and 6 primary mortgage banks whose licenses were recently revoked by the central bank. Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry has constituted a committee to address the unseasoned rise in disputes between government contractors and agencies of government. The committee, inaugurated by the Dispute Resolution Center of the Chamber, is composed of public and private sector stakeholders. Chairman of the Dispute Resolution Center, Emeka Obegolu, says the move became necessary in order to check the perennial issues of abandonment of projects and cost overrun. He said the chamber was concerned about the rising cases of disputes arising from government contracts. He said the committee will help in addressing some of the controversies surrounding the award and execution of public contracts. The committee is made up of representatives from the Federal Ministry of Justice, Federal Capital Territory Administration, Bureau of Public Procurement, Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, Institutes of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators, and the Nigerian Bar Association. Coming up, African stories. Kenya families of 8 Ethiopian crash victims to sue Boeing Airlines. And later, international news. Britain's homeless European may face problems after Brexit.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby.
We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward.
Wait, stop.
You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down. Keep walking to the left. Yes.
You're almost here.
Keep going.
You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. An attorney for families of 8 persons who died in last month's crash of an Ethiopian Airlines flight says they will sue for compensation from Boeing, who manufactured the plane and the airline. Carlos A. Velasquez, based in the U.S., said in a press conference in Nairobi on Wednesday, although it is early to tell who did what and when, there are clear points in reports in his possession that show the plane had problems with the aircraft's system and its operation. Velasquez VDA trial lawyers in Florida said the suit will be filed in a U.S. federal court and will seek compensation for economic loss and loss of a loved one. 157 persons died on March the 10th when an Ethiopian Airlines flight 8302 crashed 6 minutes after it took off from Addis Ababa on a flight to Nairobi. 32 of the passengers were Kenyans. And still on the crash, probe results coming out of Addis Ababa have credited pilots of the doomed Ethiopian Airways Boeing MAX flight with doing exactly what the manufacturer's guide had spelled out for emergencies. As a result, Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg has issued an apology on Thursday to families of victims in the 737 MAX crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia. We get details on the probe results from reporter Girum Chalel in Addis Ababa.
The Ethiopian Ministry of Transport, Ethiopian Airlines, Boeing and other stakeholders have participated in the investigation process. The International Civil Aviation Organization rules, especially Annex 13, has been strictly followed. And the preliminary report said the Boeing 737 MAX 8 plane crashed due to a faulty flight control device.
The crew obtained the license and qualifications to conduct the flight. Repetitive, uncommanded aircraft nose-down conditions are noticed. The crew performed all the procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was not able to control the aircraft.
Answering for some claims made by media that the flight control device has been damaged by a foreign object before the 737 MAX 8 took off from Bole International Airport, investigator in charge Amdiye Ayalo said,
"Foreign object damage We have not found anything that supports the claim that damage was caused by a foreign object against the flight control system. The data recorded does not indicate this was the case. We can confidently tell you that.
So, what is next? The government said it is preparing to press a charge against the manufacturer, Boeing.
As the Ethiopian government, we're going to carry out the legal procedures as per the international procedures and as per our legal proceedings.
The investigators have also recommended the manufacturer, Boeing, to review and correct the flight control unit and for other authorities to confirm changes made before the grounded 737 MAX 8s can fly again. The investigation of the Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8 flight number 302, which crashed 6 minutes into air destination Nairobi, Kenya, will continue for at least 6 months or a year. The investigators have said the full report will come up with all other details and recommendations. But one thing is clear, Boeing will have lots of assignments to do before it puts the crash stories behind it.
Residents of Alexandra Township in northern Johannesburg took to the streets on Wednesday to protest against poor service delivery and the mushrooming of illegal structures around the township. Reporter Julius Kure was there.
Residents in Alexandra say they've had enough. Many have lived here all their lives and there's been no progress. Roads leading to the township were barricaded with rocks, debris and burning tires.
Alexandra was supposed to have been redeveloped. Up to now, nothing has happened. People are up in arms. Shacks are being erected all over Alexandra. There's no space to walk. Children have got nowhere to play. We blacks, we live in the townships, are suffering. I mean, Alexandra is on fire now. It's not the first time. It won't be the last time.
Alexandra residents are angry about service delivery, and that's why they have taken to the streets to protest and call on government to do something about it.
We must listen to our voices. Let our government help us there and there, and let them meet us to our services there and there. Our clinic, it got a very poor service. And our police station, again, if you call them, they don't come on time.
The children in Alexandra wouldn't know what it is like to grow up in the Alex that we had back then in 1990s. Now it's 2019 and nothing has changed. Yet we're still voting, yet they're still encouraging us to do things whereby they don't attend to us and our needs.
Just one main highway separates Alexandra from Sandton, the richest suburb on the continent. But the inequalities are plain to see. At least 80% of the youth are unemployed here, and there's a glaring absence of big business.
If you look at the disparity between Sandton and Alex, is the extreme. You look at how Sandton is developing as we speak, and Alex is deteriorating, which is some of the things that, needs us as the community of Sandton and Alex to bridge that socio-economic gap.
There's been many failed plans to rejuvenate the township since the 1980s. Residents say attempts to engage government in recent years have fallen on deaf ears. But as South Africa prepares for a national election, protesters say they won't back down until their demands are met.
Still ahead, international news. Britain's homeless Europeans may face problems after Brexit. And later, sport. Super Eagles moved to third in Africa in latest FIFA rankings.
You are watching ANN. Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you'll need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website, annafrica.net, and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, African News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is in a news and world event. Russia's Interfax news agency is reporting Venezuela may soon get more Russian troops. Deputy Foreign Minister Ivan Gil says on Thursday he would not rule out that possibility because of agreement already concluded with Russia. Gil also said Russian forces will stay in Venezuela as long as needed. Venezuela's political turmoil has further deepened amid growing tension over President Nicolas Maduro's future as the country's leader. Maduro started a second term in January, following a widely boycotted election last year that many foreign governments refused to recognize. In late January, leader of the opposition-controlled National Assembly, Juan Guaido, declared himself the interim president. Earlier, the Kremlin said Russian military specialists are in Venezuela to service pre-existing contract for the supply of Russian arms. U.S. Special Representative for Venezuela said last week U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has a list of options, including sanctions, that Washington could use to respond to the presence of Russian troops in Venezuela. As Brexit departure date looms, many areas of British life are being assessed in an effort to calculate what toll Brexit could bring on the United Kingdom. One of those questions is what would happen to those Europeans who are down on their luck in the country. Thousands of Europeans asleep rough on Britain's streets could be at a risk of further deprivation, be it detention or deportation, once the country leaves the European Union and they lose their right to remain. While Britain's exact departure date is unclear, charities fear no amount of extra time will help thousands of homeless Europeans prepare the paperwork and complete the procedures needed to stay on legally in the country they now call home. Some of those homeless Europeans now say they are worried about Brexit. Some of them have been living in Britain for more than 2 decades and would like to stay in the country. A report commissioned by National Homelessness Charities says Brexit will bring real challenges for homelessness, which would affect at least 1,000 Europeans living in the UK. Australia says it will cut its annual immigration intake by 15% and force some new arrivals to live in regional areas. In a bid to ease pressure on roads, housing and other public infrastructure, reporter Greg Navarro follows up on that.
For Afghani refugee Ali, the decision to settle in the rural town of Griffith, where he now has his own business, was an easy one.
You're very friendly. Yeah. And also we can find easy job as well, because the population not too much.
Australia's government hopes that more new arrivals will take the same path to less populated towns under new changes to permanent migration. That includes cutting the country's annual migrant intake by about 30,000 people and providing incentives for some new arrivals and international students who choose rural areas over Australia's major cities.
According to the federal government, about 112,000 skilled migrants arrived in the country last financial year. Out of that number, it says more than 8 out of every 10 people settled here in Sydney or in Melbourne.
The government argues that its major cities are struggling under rapid population growth, impacting everything from public transportation to housing.
There's no doubt that we have got substantial congestion. Anyone who lives in Sydney realises that, or Melbourne.
University of Technology Sydney professor Jock Collins studies immigration and its impacts.
The problem is that the large immigration program, in fact over now 7 decades, hasn't been met by the required public infrastructure investment.
And there are concerns that the new measures won't have much impact. The new cap on permanent migration is only 2,000 less than the number of permanent migrants who arrived here last year. And there doesn't appear to be any policies in place to ensure that people who initially move into rural centres remain there. Much of Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison's election campaign recently has focused on being tough on border security and stopping boats filled with people seeking asylum in Australia illegally. University of Sydney political science lecturer Stuart Jackson says the attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand earlier this month, which claimed 50 lives, has forced Australia's government to change its election focus.
Post-Christchurch, it becomes not possible to talk about holding those people away. Somehow they are, brown people who shouldn't be brought here, or words to those effect. you have this situation of, well, we can't talk about it in the context of white supremacy. We might be seen as being racist, or very specifically racist. So we'll talk about migration then, and we'll talk about who comes to the country and what do we need here.
The new changes are set to take effect in July.
Up next, sport. Super Eagles moved to third in Africa in latest FIFA rankings. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. The Super Eagles are now ranked third in Africa after moving up 4 places to 42nd in the latest FIFA ranking released on Thursday. The three-time African champions had won against Seychelles and Egypt in the last international window, which pushed them up in the ranking. The Nigeria Football Federation has approved the appointment of Pearl Halson, a conditioning coach, and Marty Demigourg as a video analyst for the Super Falcons ahead of June's 2019 Women's World Cup finals in France. Both were recommended by head coach Thomas Denoby. NFF says the move will boost the preparations of the 9-time champions. And that is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Enjoy your weekend.